My husband slid divorce papers across our kitchen table beside a half-eaten Costco rotisserie chicken and said, "I need somebody softer." That was it. 16 years together reduced to one sentence and a stack of papers clipped with a blue binder clip from his office. I remember staring at the chicken first, not him. Funny the things your brain grabs onto when your life cracks open. The kitchen smelled like garlic seasoning and lemon dish soap. The dishwasher hummed softly behind me. Outside, somebody in the neighborhood was mowing their lawn even though it was almost 8 o'clock at night. Normal Tuesday sounds. And there I was, sitting across from my husband trying to figure out when exactly he'd stopped loving me. Ethan wouldn't look directly at me at first. He kept adjusting the cuff of this tight navy blazer he'd started wearing after joining that expensive gym in Virginia Beach. He'd lost maybe 15 pounds in the past year, and suddenly acted like he was auditioning to be the divorced guy in a pharmaceutical commercial. "I'm not trying to hurt you," he said. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, because it was such a ridiculous thing to say while handing somebody divorce papers. "You already did," I told him. He rubbed his forehead. "Rachel, you know what I mean." I leaned back slowly in my chair. "No, actually I don't." That was when he finally looked at me. And I could see it plain as day. Relief. Not sadness, not guilt, relief. Like he'd been rehearsing this speech in his head for months and was finally getting it over with. "You're a good person," he said carefully, "but living with you feels like living with a commanding officer." There it was. I folded my arms and waited. "You're rigid. Everything has to be organized, scheduled, controlled." He shook his head. I want peace. I want warmth." His eyes drifted down toward my hands sitting on the table. And for a second mine did too. The scar across my knuckle from loading equipment in Bahrain 20 years ago. Dry skin from years of bleach winter air hospital sanitizer yard work life. Hands that changed his father's adult diapers when chemo got bad. Hands that fixed leaking sinks because Ethan wasn't handy. Hands that cooked signed paperwork, paid bills, drove relatives to doctor appointments. Apparently all that translated to too hard to love. "You need somebody softer," I said quietly. He exhaled like he was grateful I understood. That part still makes me angry. Not the divorce itself. The relief on his face when he thought I was making it easy for him. "You deserve somebody who makes you happy," he said. That sentence sounded suspiciously prepared too. I picked up the papers. The lawyer's office was in Norfolk, filing date already stamped. He'd had this ready longer than he admitted. "Who is she?" I asked. His jaw tightened just slightly. Tiny tell. Same expression he used to make when he lied about buying fishing gear. "There's nobody," he said too quickly. I just nodded. At 44 years old, you learn there are questions that waste your energy. I signed the papers without arguing. That seemed to unsettle him more than screaming would have. "You're taking this very calmly," he said. I almost told him the truth. That when you spend years around military families, hospitals, funerals, emergency calls in the middle of the night, your definition of disaster changes. Nobody was dead. It still hurt like hell, though. I grabbed my keys and left before he could say anything else. Outside, the August humidity wrapped around me immediately. Chesapeake summers always feel damp enough to breathe through. I got into my F-150 and shut the door. And then I just sat there. My truck smelled faintly like motor oil and black coffee. The passenger seat still had a reusable Food Lion bag rolling around on the floor from grocery shopping earlier that day. Normal life. That was the part I couldn't get over. I drove aimlessly for maybe 20 minutes before ending up at the Wawa near Battlefield Boulevard. I parked under one of those ugly white parking lot lights and bought a coffee I didn't even want. Then I sat in the truck crying quietly into a paper cup while people pumped gas around me. No dramatic breakdown. Just exhaustion. 16 years is a long time to suddenly realize somebody's been slowly pulling away from you while you were busy holding everything together. A teenage employee knocked gently on my window at one point because he thought something was wrong. I rolled it down halfway. "You okay, ma'am?" I nodded fast. "Yeah, allergies." He clearly didn't believe me but let it go. I stayed there another half hour before driving home. Well, not home exactly anymore. Over the next couple weeks, Ethan became weirdly efficient about ending our marriage. Too efficient. He kept asking when I planned to move the rest of my things. Soon, I told him. It's just, he scratched the back of his neck, somebody may need to stay here temporarily. That confirmed everything. A month later, I found out her name accidentally through Ethan's Facebook. Lila Bennett, 31 years old, lifestyle influencer from Atlanta with professionally whitened teeth and inspirational captions about healing journeys. I stared at her profile picture for a long time. She looked soft. 3 months after our divorce finalized, Ethan planned a small wedding dinner at a seafood place near Virginia Beach oceanfront. I had absolutely no intention of going. Then his mother called me. Rachel Helen Mercer said in that raspy smoker's voice of hers, "If you don't go with me, I'm not going." Helen. No, she cut me off. That girl barely knows him, and Ethan's acting like a damn fool. You're still family to me. She paused. Then softer. You're the only daughter-in-law I've got. So I went. Not for Ethan. For her. The private room overlooked the water, everybody dressed too young for their age. Ethan wore a cream-colored jacket that made him look like a casino manager. Lila was prettier in person, I'll give her that. But she also looked nervous. Not glowing, not happy nervous, more like somebody trying very hard to perform happiness correctly. Then Ethan introduced me. The second she heard my full name, her entire expression changed. Color drained from her face so fast it honestly startled me. She stared at me for several seconds. Then quietly said, "Wait, are you the Iron Widow?" For a second I honestly thought I'd misheard her. The restaurant noise faded into this dull blur around me, silverware clinking, somebody laughing too loudly near the bar, ocean wind rattling the windows overlooking Atlantic Avenue. But all I could hear was that name. Iron Widow. I hadn't heard it spoken out loud in almost 6 years. Helen squeezed my forearm lightly beside me. "You all right, honey?" "Yeah," I said automatically. I wasn't. Lila still looked pale. Not scared exactly, more like somebody who'd accidentally opened the wrong door and found something they weren't supposed to see. Ethan glanced between us, confused. What the hell is Iron Widow? Neither of us answered him. Lila swallowed hard. "My brother talked about you." That caught my attention. "Your brother?" "T. Bennett, Navy Corpsman." The name hit me immediately. Not because we'd been close. We weren't. I'd only met him twice in person. But there are certain names your brain stores permanently whether you want them or not. Ty Bennett had survived. A lot of others hadn't. I set my wine glass down carefully. "Oh," I said quietly, "Ty." Ethan gave this irritated little laugh like he was left out of a joke. "You two know each other or something." Lila ignored him completely. "You're Rachel Mercer," she said again, softer this time. Jesus. I suddenly wanted to leave. Not because of Ethan, him I could handle. But I hated that nickname, hated what came attached to it. The room felt too warm all of a sudden. "I need some air," I muttered. I stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the water before anybody could stop me. Virginia Beach in late September has this strange mix of beauty and exhaustion to it. Tourists mostly gone, salt in the air, wind strong enough to sting your face a little. I gripped the railing and breathed slowly. Then I heard the door slide open behind me. Lila. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to upset you." I gave a tired shrug. "You didn't." That was partly true. The memories upset me, not her. She wrapped her arms around herself against the wind. Up close, she looked younger than 31. Younger and less polished somehow. The influencer confidence I'd seen online wasn't really there in person. "My brother still talks about you sometimes," she said. I looked out toward the dark water. He shouldn't. That's not what he says. I almost laughed at that. People love romanticizing survival after enough years pass. They turn complicated nights into clean stories with heroes and villains. Real life doesn't work that way. Back in 2018, I was attached to a joint intelligence support operation out of Norfolk, mostly coordination work, monitoring communications, movement tracking, logistics. Nothing glamorous. Despite what movies tell people, most military operations involve exhausted adults staring at screens under fluorescent lights while drinking terrible coffee. That night started the same way. I still remember the hum of cooling fans inside the operations room, somebody eating stale pretzels behind me, static crackling through a headset loud enough to trigger a migraine. Then communication started collapsing. Fast. One bad update after another. Weather interference, delayed extraction timing, incorrect movement estimates, a vehicle where there shouldn't have been one. The kind of chain reaction that kills people before anybody fully understands what's happening. At one point, one of the pilots asked for confirmation to continue toward a secondary landing zone. I looked at the satellite feed. And I knew. If they kept going, they were flying straight into a kill zone. I remember staring at the screen while everybody waited for my call. Then I told them to pull back. The room went dead silent afterward. Some men survived because of that decision. Others never made it out. That's the ugly truth nobody likes attaching to heroic nicknames. You save who you can. Then you spend years wondering about everybody else. A few of the guys started calling me Iron Widow after that operation. Half respect, half resentment. The kind of nickname people invent when nobody knows what to do with grief. The men who called me that were either dead, I said quietly, still staring at the ocean, or trying hard to forget the same night I was. Lila didn't say anything for a while. Finally she asked, "You really saved Ty's unit?" I shook my head immediately. No, that's not how it works. A lot of people made decisions that night. But your call kept them out of that area. I looked over at her. You should understand something, I said. Anybody telling military stories 10 years later usually leaves out the parts that still wake them up at 2 a.m. That seemed to land with her. Inside the restaurant, I could hear Ethan laughing loudly again, performing confidence for the room. Lila glanced back toward the glass doors. Then she lowered her voice. He told me you were emotionally abusive. Well, there it was. I let out one slow breath through my nose. What exactly does emotionally abusive mean these days? She looked uncomfortable. That you controlled everything. That he never felt good enough around you. That you treated him like one of your soldiers. Honestly, that hurt more than I expected. Not because it was true, because I suddenly understood the version of me Ethan had been building behind my back. A cold woman, sharp edges, impossible standards. Meanwhile, I'd spent 16 years reminding him about dentist appointments and helping his mother organize medication schedules. Funny how quickly care becomes control once somebody stops loving you. I'm sorry, Lila said softly. I studied her face carefully then. She didn't look smug. She looked confused. That changed something for me. Not much, but enough. You don't owe me an apology, I told her. You didn't make vows to me. The balcony door opened again. Ethan stepped outside, smiling, already slightly drunk. There you two are. He pointed between us jokingly. What is this, some secret women's meeting? Lila stiffened beside me. I noticed that immediately. Ethan didn't. He wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her temple like they were in a commercial. You okay, babe? Fine, she said too quickly. He looked at me. You surviving all this military trauma bonding? There it was again. That little mocking edge he'd developed recently whenever my service came up. Not enough for other people to notice. Just enough for me to feel it. I gave him a calm smile. You seem happy, Ethan. I am happy. The speed of his answer told me everything. Happy people usually don't need witnesses. Lila quietly excused herself and went back inside. Ethan watched her go, confused. Then he looked at me. I don't know what she's been talking to you about, he said, lowering his voice, but don't make this weird tonight. I stared at him for a long second. This man had once held my hand through appendicitis surgery. I used to know the exact sound of his footsteps in our hallway. Now he was warning me not to ruin his party. Life's strange that way. I'm not the one lying to her, I said. His expression hardened immediately. There you go, he muttered, always trying to make people question me. And there it was. The first time I realized Ethan genuinely believed his own rewritten version of our marriage. That scared me more than the divorce itself, because people who lie long enough eventually stop hearing the difference between performance and truth. Before I left that night, Lila caught me near the valet stand. She looked nervous. If Ethan lied about somebody like you, she said quietly, I don't know what else he's lied about. Then she handed me her phone number. And for the first time since my marriage ended, I had the strange feeling the story wasn't actually over yet. After the wedding dinner, I told myself I was done thinking about Ethan Mercer. That lasted maybe 48 hours. Heartbreak at 44 isn't dramatic the way it is when you're 22. You don't lay on the floor listening to sad music anymore. You still have bills, responsibilities, laundry. You get up and keep moving because nobody's coming to rescue you. But grief still sneaks into ordinary places. I'd wake up around 2:30 every morning, reaching toward the empty side of the bed before remembering there was nobody there. That part was the worst. Not the betrayal. The muscle memory. I stopped sleeping properly after the divorce finalized. Started driving around Chesapeake late at night because sitting still made my thoughts louder. Some nights I'd cross the bridge toward Norfolk with old country music playing low through the speakers. George Strait, Patti Loveless, Alan Jackson, the kind of music that sounds better after midnight. I'd stop near the water sometimes and just sit there watching cargo ships move through the dark. It felt strange realizing the world keeps functioning no matter what happens to your marriage. The Navy base still buzzed every morning. Wawa still sold burnt coffee. Old men still argued about fishing bait outside tackle shops. Meanwhile, my whole life had split open. A few weeks after Ethan remarried, people started acting strange around me. Not everybody. Just enough to notice. Conversations got awkward. Invitations slowed down. Certain mutual friends suddenly became very careful with their wording. At first I thought I was imagining it. Then one afternoon I ran into an old neighbor named Denise at Harris Teeter. She looked uncomfortable the second she saw me. "How you holding up?" she asked carefully. "I've been worse." She nodded too fast. Well, divorce brings out the worst in everybody. Something about the way she said it made me pause. What exactly has Ethan been telling people? That caught her off guard. Oh, she shifted her shopping basket awkwardly. Nothing terrible. Which in Southern language usually means exactly the opposite. After enough hesitation, she finally sighed. He said living with you was hard, that you controlled everything. She lowered her voice. He told people you treated him more like an employee than a husband. I just stood there beside the frozen food section staring at a stack of pizzas while my face burned. It's amazing how humiliating lies feel when they're built from tiny pieces of truth. Yes, I liked structure. Yes, I handled most decisions. Because somebody had to. Ethan forgot things constantly. Bills, appointments, deadlines. Half our adult life functioned because I carried the mental load quietly in the background while he got to be the charming one. Now suddenly I was some cold military stereotype. That night I sat alone in my kitchen eating soup straight from the pot because I didn't feel like dirtying another dish. The silence in the house felt heavier lately. I'd stopped wearing my wedding ring weeks ago, but I still caught myself touching the pale line on my finger sometimes. Around 9:30 my phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a second I almost ignored it. Then I saw the Virginia area code. The message was short. "This is Lila. I think we should talk, woman to woman." I stared at the screen a long time before answering. Part of me wanted nothing to do with her. Another part of me needed to know how bad Ethan's lies really were. We met 3 days later at a diner near Norfolk called Dumar's. Old place, red booths, onion rings everybody swears are the best in Virginia. Lila arrived wearing oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. Nervous people always think accessories make them harder to read. They don't. She sat across from me, fidgeting with a paper napkin while the waitress poured coffee. Neither of us spoke for almost a full minute. Finally, she blurted out, "He's still talking to other women." "Well, that was quick." I leaned back slowly. "You sound surprised." "I know how that sounds." "How long have you known?" "Maybe 2 weeks." She rubbed her forehead hard. I kept telling myself it wasn't serious. Then I found a dating app profile. Her voice cracked slightly. He told one woman he was divorced and emotionally recovering from an abusive marriage. There it was again. Abusive. Amazing word. Covers almost anything nowadays. What exactly did he say I did? Lila hesitated. That you belittled him, controlled finances, made him feel weak. I let out a quiet breath through my nose. Then I stirred my coffee for several seconds before answering. Did Ethan mention who paid the mortgage when he got laid off in 2019? Silence. Did he mention I drained my savings helping his father through cancer treatment? More silence. Did he mention I covered his truck payments for 8 months after he maxed out 2 credit cards buying golf equipment during his midlife crisis? Lila stared down at the table. Number. Of course not. I wasn't even angry anymore. Mostly tired. The waitress dropped off onion rings and neither of us touched them. Finally, Lila spoke quietly. I don't think he's who I thought he was. That sentence sounded painfully sincere. And suddenly I saw her differently. Not as the younger woman who replaced me. Just another person who got sold a fantasy by a man terrified of aging. He lies differently depending on who he's talking to, I said. Lila looked up slowly. That got her attention. I continued. With me he played helpless, with you he plays wounded. Her expression shifted immediately because she knew I was right. That was the first real crack. Over the next hour we compared timelines carefully. Nothing dramatic, just details. Dates. Trips. Credit card charges. Things that didn't add up. That's the thing about intelligence work people misunderstand. Most of it isn't hacking computers or cinematic surveillance. It's pattern recognition. Human beings repeat themselves constantly. I asked simple questions. Did he ever angle his phone away when texting? Yes. Turn notifications off suddenly? Yes. Take random drives late at night? Yes. By the end of coffee, Lila looked sick. Then came the part that truly made my stomach turn. Our retirement account. A shared account I hadn't fully reviewed since the divorce paperwork. Lila mentioned Ethan complaining recently about BMW payments. BMW payments. I blinked slowly. What BMW? Her face changed immediately. He told me you knew. Nope. Turned out Ethan had quietly withdrawn money from our retirement fund months earlier. Not enough to trigger major legal attention immediately. Just enough to finance his reinvention. Luxury lease, watches, weekend trips, expensive dinners he absolutely could not afford. At one point, Lila quietly admitted he'd bought her a designer purse. Fake, apparently. That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was pathetic. After we left the diner, I drove to visit Earl Simmons. Retired Master Chief, 68 years old, lived 3 houses down from me. Earl listened quietly while I explained everything from his back porch while mosquitoes attacked both of us. When I finally finished, he nodded slowly. At our age, he said people don't usually fall apart all at once. He took a sip of sweet tea. They crack slowly, then blame whoever happened to be standing nearby when the sound finally reached them. I sat there staring at the yard for a while. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message from Lila. I found another woman. She's 28. He told her he's trapped in a toxic marriage. That was the moment I realized something important. Ethan hadn't left me because he found happiness. He left because he needed new people who still believed his stories. By the time Ethan's 50th birthday dinner rolled around in November, I already knew 2 things for certain. First, he was still lying. Second, he genuinely believed he was smarter than everybody around him. That combination ruins people eventually. You just have to give it enough room. The dinner was held at a private seafood restaurant near the Virginia Beach Marina, one of those places with low-lighting, overpriced oysters and waiters who describe mashed potatoes like they're explaining fine art. Helen asked me to come early because her arthritis had been acting up. So around 5:30 I picked her up from her condo in Chesapeake. She moved slowly these days, hands stiff, knees worse when rain was coming. You don't have to stay long, she told me while fastening her seatbelt carefully. I know this isn't easy for you. I gave a small shrug. I've survived worse evenings. That got the tiniest smile out of her. As we drove toward the marina, she stared quietly out the passenger window. Then suddenly said your father-in-law would have been ashamed of Ethan lately. I kept my eyes on the road. I'm sorry, she added softly. That almost broke me more than the divorce did. Because Helen meant it. The restaurant had decorated a private room with gold balloons and framed photos from Ethan's life. Childhood baseball pictures, college graduation, wedding photos. Even ours were still there. That surprised me. Lila stood near the entrance greeting guests when we arrived. She looked beautiful in a dark green dress but tired around the eyes. Not sleeping well, probably. I recognized the look. Ethan came over immediately with that loud, overly cheerful energy people use when they're trying to convince themselves everything's perfect. There she is, he announced when he saw me, Rachel Mercer herself. I kissed Helen's cheek and ignored him. The room held maybe 30 people total, co-workers from Ethan's medical sales company, a couple neighbors, some golf buddies, 2 cousins from Richmond. Normal middle-aged party crowd. Everybody pretending not to notice the tension. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Wine poured, bread baskets passed around. Somebody told a long, boring story about traffic near Norfolk Naval Station. For about an hour, things almost felt normal. Then Ethan started drinking faster. That was always when the performance version of him slipped. By his 3rd bourbon, the little comments started. Rachel used to organize our pantry like a military warehouse. Polite laughter. A few minutes later, I swear living with her felt like being audited by the Pentagon. More awkward laughter. I focused on buttering a dinner roll beside Helen. Then came the one that finally shifted the room. The waiter accidentally brought Ethan the wrong whiskey. Before the poor kid could apologize, Ethan grinned and pointed toward me. See, Rachel would have had this place running like boot camp by now. A couple people laughed automatically. But nobody really enjoyed it anymore. Because underneath the joke sat something ugly. And people could feel it. I glanced toward Lila. She wasn't smiling. She looked done. About 20 minutes later, Ethan stood to give a speech. God help anybody drunk enough to believe people want a speech during dinner. He tapped his glass dramatically. I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Slight slur already creeping into his words. He wrapped one arm around Lila's shoulders. This woman brought happiness back into my life. Lila stayed completely still. Ethan either didn't notice or didn't care. I spent years feeling judged, he continued. Like no matter what I did, I could never relax. There it was again. The narrative. The poor wounded husband finally escaping the cold military wife. I watched several guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. Even they were getting tired of it. Then Ethan laughed and added, I mean, hell, Rachel probably still has spreadsheets ranking all my personal failures somewhere. A couple nervous chuckles. But before I could even react, something interrupted him. A voice. Coming through the restaurant speakers overhead. Female voice, young. Hey baby, I miss you. The room froze instantly. Ethan stopped mid-sentence. Everybody looked around confused for half a second before realizing the sound was coming from his phone, connected to the restaurant sound system. Another message played automatically. I can't wait until you finally leave her completely. Dead silence. Ethan's face lost all color. Oh shit. He grabbed for his phone too fast and nearly knocked over his drink. The speakers crackled again. Then came Ethan's own voice this time. Low, flirty, intimate. Baby, she doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I just need a little more time. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. You could hear silverware settling against plates. Ethan frantically jabbed at his phone screen. Wrong buttons. Wrong app. Panic makes people stupid. Turn it off, he hissed at nobody in particular. But the damage was already done. Lila stood slowly. Calmly. That was the part I remember most. No screaming, no throwing drinks, no theatrics. Just exhaustion finally hardening into clarity. She reached into her purse and placed several folded papers onto the table in front of him. Bank statements. Credit card records. Screenshots. I recognized some immediately. Retirement withdrawals. BMW payments. Dating profiles. One guest quietly whispered, Jesus Christ. Ethan looked around desperately. This isn't what it looks like. Classic line. Always fascinating when people say that while staring directly at evidence. Lila spoke softly but clearly. You told me Rachel controlled you, she swallowed hard, but you were stealing from her. Ethan turned toward me immediately. Like somehow this was my fault now too. You talked to her behind my back. I almost laughed. Behind his back. As if secrecy was suddenly offensive to him. You lied to both of us, Lila continued, for months. She's manipulating you, Ethan snapped instantly, pointing toward me. You don't know what she's really like. That was the moment Helen finally spoke. She'd stayed silent the entire night. Now she slowly set down her wine glass and looked directly at her son. Your father spent 43 years trying to become a decent man, she said quietly. Nobody moved. Nobody even looked away. And you threw that away in under 6 months. That landed harder than any screaming could have. Ethan looked stunned. Like he genuinely never imagined his mother might stop defending him someday. The room had fully turned by then. Not dramatically, just slowly. People avoiding eye contact with him, co-workers checking watches, guests suddenly fascinated by tablecloths. Humiliation rarely arrives all at once. Usually it creeps in inch by inch until somebody realizes there's nowhere left to stand. Ethan tried one last time. "Rachel, say something." I looked at him across the table for a long moment. This man had once been my best friend. Now he looked small. Not evil. Not powerful. Just small. So I told him the truth. "I did love you," I said quietly. "That's what makes this so embarrassing." Then I picked up Helen's purse for her. Lila slid off her wedding ring and placed it beside Ethan's untouched birthday cake. Nobody stopped her when she walked out. And for the first time in months, I realized I didn't actually hate Ethan anymore. I pitied him, which somehow felt worse. About 5 months after Ethan's birthday dinner collapsed, I repainted my kitchen. That probably sounds small. But if you've ever survived a long marriage ending, you understand how certain rooms start carrying ghosts. That kitchen had become one of them. Every time I walked past the table where Ethan handed me those divorce papers, my chest tightened a little. Not dramatically, just enough to remind me. So one Saturday morning in April, I drove to Home Depot, bought 3 paint samples, and spent half an hour arguing with myself in the aisle like an old woman choosing lottery numbers. I finally picked a pale blue-gray color called Harbor Mist. Very coastal Virginia. The guy at the paint counter told me it was popular with retirees remodeling beach condos. Perfect. I spent the entire weekend painting with old country music playing through a Bluetooth speaker while spring air drifted through the windows. And somewhere between the second coat and scrubbing paint off my wrist, I realized something strange. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It just felt quiet. There's a difference. Healing at my age didn't come in dramatic breakthroughs. No movie moments, no standing in the rain suddenly feeling reborn. It happened slowly. Morning by morning. I started sleeping better first. Then eating regularly again. Then one day I realized I'd gone almost 6 hours without thinking about Ethan at all. That one surprised me. I started taking my truck down to the water before sunrise on weekends. Just me, cheap coffee, and a fishing pole I barely knew how to use properly. Mostly I sat there watching the light come up over the Chesapeake Bay, while retired men nearby complained about bait prices and politics. Honestly, it was good for me. Life sounds healthier around ordinary people. I also started mentoring younger women on base again. That helped more than therapy some weeks. A lot of those girls came into leadership programs believing competence made them unlovable, like they had to shrink themselves to keep relationships comfortable. I recognized that fear immediately because I'd lived it. One afternoon after class, a young lieutenant apologized to me for being too intense. I remember looking at her and thinking, God, we really train women to apologize for surviving difficult environments. So I told her something nobody told me at 30. Being capable isn't a character flaw. She looked like she might cry hearing that. Funny what people carry around starving for. Lila and I stayed loosely in touch after the dinner disaster. Not best friends. That would have felt forced and strange. But respectful. Real. She moved out of Ethan's condo within a week and eventually relocated back toward Atlanta temporarily to stay with family. A couple months later, she texted me a photo of nursing school acceptance paperwork with, "Guess I'm starting over too." I stared at that message for a while before smiling. Starting over at 31 hurts. Starting over at 44 hurts too. But staying somewhere unhealthy hurts longer. As for Ethan, well, nobody destroyed him. He handled that himself. Turns out medical sales companies don't love public personal scandals once clients start gossiping, especially when financial instability starts affecting work performance. He didn't get fired immediately, but he stopped hitting numbers. Then came missed meetings. Then came performance concerns. By February, he was gone. The BMW disappeared shortly after. Repossessed. I only know because one of Helen's neighbors mentioned seeing a tow truck outside his condo at 6 in the morning. Apparently, Ethan moved into a small apartment outside Norfolk after that. Nothing tragic. Nothing cinematic. Just smaller. That's the part people rarely understand about consequences. Most of them aren't explosions. They're reductions. Smaller life, smaller pride, smaller world. Helen and I still talk every Sunday. Never about Ethan unless she brings him up first. Mostly we discuss weather grocery prices and whether her church friends are secretly alcoholics. A few weeks ago she admitted something quietly while we were eating lunch together. "I think he was intimidated by you," she said. I laughed softly into my iced tea. "At his age." "At any age," she replied. Then she shrugged. "Some people mistake strength for judgment." That stayed with me. Because I spent a long time believing Ethan's version of our marriage. Maybe I was too rigid, too difficult, too independent. Maybe being dependable made me impossible to live with. But distance changes perspective. And once enough time passed, I could finally see what actually happened. Ethan didn't fall apart because I was cold. He fell apart because he built his self-worth around feeling admired instead of becoming accountable. There's a difference. About a month ago, he emailed me. Not texted. Emailed. Very middle-aged man behavior. The subject line simply said, "I'm sorry." I opened it on my laptop one Tuesday night while eating leftover chili. The message was long. A lot of regret, a lot of explanations, a lot of sentences about not feeling like himself. Halfway through reading it, I closed the computer. Not angrily. Just calmly. Some conversations arrive too late to matter anymore. I blocked the address afterward and went back to my dinner. That was it. No dramatic final confrontation. No revenge speech. Just silence. And honestly, that felt more peaceful than winning. Sometimes I still think about the night Ethan handed me those papers beside that stupid Costco chicken. Back then I thought my life was ending. Now I understand something different. It was only changing shape. For a long time I thought being strong made me hard to love. Truth is, it just made weak people uncomfortable. And if you've ever been punished for surviving hard things, for carrying too much, for staying steady when other people fell apart, you're not alone. Thanks for spending this time with me tonight.